Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're having a bout of deja vu, and we've seen this before, right? Me standing next to a BMW 3 Series and a Mercedes C-Class and trying to pick a winner. Well, you're right, we have done this before, but this time things are a little different. BMW recently gave the 3 Series a facelift, and Mercedes recently put a new diesel engine into the C-Class. The result is both cars now have a range-topping diesel variant that costs around 45 lakh rupees. These are the cars we have with us today. Let's go see what's what. So, what you see before you is the Mercedes C250d and the BMW 320d M Sport. And both cost roughly 5 lakhs more than their lesser counterparts. Just by looking at them, however, there's hardly any way to tell. The C-Class especially has absolutely no changes on the outside, apart from the fancier, adaptive full LED headlights that the standard car doesn't get. Its smooth regal shape and nice chrome detailing still has a lot of appeal, but we really wish Merc did a bit more to set this 250d apart from the 220d. The BMW 320d does a bit better. It's the M Sport version, so there are more aggressive bumpers and side skirts, as well as larger, sportier wheels. And as ever with the 3 Series, it looks the sportier and more aggressive of the two. But let's leave the exterior for passers-by to admire and head to where you'll be spending most of your time. Now, one of the C-Class's biggest strengths from day one has always been its interior. And even in the company of this updated 3 Series, it still stands out as the much better interior. One thing I'm not a fan of though is the infotainment screen. It's still too small and should have been better integrated into the dash. The BMW, on the other hand, is a very different cup of tea. You're sat really low down, maybe a little bit too low for some shorter people, but it really gives you a sense of feeling connected with the car. The M Sport even gets a fighter jet-like heads-up display as standard, as well as launch control. What's not so nice is that they haven't updated the design in the process, and it's starting to really look a little bit old and generic now. So, not a lot has changed on the inside or the outside of these cars, so perhaps it's best to look at what's under the bonnet. Now you might remember this engine, the 250d, from a number of larger Mercs as well as the previous generation C-Class. It's the twin-turbo version of the existing 2.1-litre 4-cylinder diesel. Now, while it doesn't feel outright ferocious, in fact it's rather linear, you can feel the added punch over the C220d. With 34 horsepower and 100 Nm more than the C220d, it should feel punchier. But the kicker is that it has 14 horsepower and 100 Nm more than the Beamer too. What really helps things though is the new 9G-tronic 9-speed automatic gearbox. It is really super responsive and quick to react. Where in other gearboxes 9 speeds might seem like a bit too much and the gearbox fumbles around in tricky situations, in this one it seems quite prudent in its gear selection. When you're going up an incline and you suddenly ask for a burst of acceleration, for example, it won't fumble through the gears. It'll pick the right one and stick to it till you clear the incline and make smooth progress. It's really quite intelligent. So it's looking pretty good for the Merc, but amazingly, even though it's down on power, it's the BMW that's half a second quicker to 100 km an hour. And though on paper the engine might seem the same as before, it isn't. Now this is a BMW 320d, so it gets a 2-litre diesel engine, right? You may not know this, but this is actually an all-new 2-litre diesel engine. It has the same cubic capacity as before, but power has gone up ever so slightly from around 184 horsepower to 189 horsepower. The thing is, however, though it is more refined than before, it's still not as refined as the Mercedes. Though power comes in a more linear manner than before, it's still not delivered as cleanly as the Merc, and it still hands out bursts of torque, making it a little less easy to drive. Another area where the BMW falls short of the Mercedes is in its gearbox. The 8-speed ZF unit is not as quick to respond as the brand new Mercedes 9-speed unit. and as a result it's a little bit hesitant off the line, so you can't make progress as quickly as you probably would have liked to. The peaky power delivery and sometimes fumbly gearbox mean the 320d isn't as good as the Merc at slow city speeds, but is instead at its best when you're pushing it as hard as possible. Speaking of which, but where BMW is still truly the master is in the handling department. This steering is just so well calibrated. This car doesn't have adjustable suspension, but it feels like it does, because when you dial through the various drive modes, the steering weighs up so progressively and it gives you so much confidence. It feels like the whole dynamic of the car has completely changed. It's just brilliant. And then there's the body control. You can fling this car mercilessly into a hard corner and it will just adapt so fluidly. No drama, just loads of grip around the corner. It's fantastic. Credit where it's due though, the Mercedes isn't all that bad either. It's actually got sharper, quicker steering and body control is quite decent too. The steering in the C250d is certainly lighter than the one in the BMW, but that's not entirely a bad thing. It's still got enough heft, and the good part is that it's really quick, and that means it really allows you to chuck the C-Class around corners quite easily. But the Merc just doesn't have the same grip or poise of the Beamer, which still rules the roost overall in the fun handling department. Where Mercs traditionally score some points back is with their incredible ride quality, but we were in for a surprise. Now when Mercedes brought the C-Class to India, they had to raise it to deal with our poor roads, and in doing so they also had to stiffen it. The result is a less than stellar ride quality, and that means over slightly rough patches or even bumpy roads, you and your occupants will be tossed around a little bit. The upshot of the firm suspension is that it rides very flat and stays very composed when you're going at high speeds. So that's a bonus if you drive on the highway a lot. But let's face it, most of us will tackle city roads every day, which really aren't the best. Now the 3 Series is clearly the better riding car in this test. It's got a softer suspension setup and that means it absorbs bumps a whole lot better. The best part is that it's also compliant, which means it doesn't bounce you and toss you around the place. And the even better part is that this hasn't come at the cost of handling. This is still an amazing car to drive. Now while I'm back here, I might as well tell you what the seats and space are like. Though both these cars are a bit more rewarding from the driver's seat than their base models, this is India after all, so at some point you will be chauffeur driven. Let's start with the Benz. The back seat of the C-Class really has a lot going for it, most notably the luxurious ambience created by the soft leather and the rich wood. But it's also got this neat little second sunroof, which is great. It's only for the rear passengers. And while there is enough legroom and enough headroom, where it really does suffer is in thigh support on this seat. As you might be able to see, there is not enough of it, and the C-Class loses out to the 3 Series in this respect. When you look at the 3 Series from the outside, it might seem a little low and you might think that there's not a whole lot of room back here, but it couldn't be further from the truth. You see, BMW has very cleverly placed the seat lower and further back, and while that means getting in and out is a little bit more difficult, the end result is that it's a far more comfortable seat. I've got fantastic thigh support, fantastic back support, great headroom, and as much if not more legroom than what you get in the C-Class. So overall, it's a point here and a point there for both these cars. This is definitely going to be a close fight. So once again, as usual with these two, it has come down to the wire. It's so hard to pick a winner. On one hand, you have the BMW, which is amazing to drive, but has also upped its luxury quotient. But then there's the Mercedes, which has a much better engine and gearbox than before. It's important then to look at these cars exactly for what they are, which is top-end diesel variants that cost a bit more than the standard variant. Over the regular car, the 320d M Sport gets you a racy body kit and wheels, a bit more interior flourishes, and a bit more equipment too. The C250d, on the other hand, gets you a much stronger engine and a much better gearbox, as well as a bit more equipment too. So while they are quite closely matched on the driving and being driven in front, when it comes to taking your extra money that extra mile, it's the Mercedes that does it better, which is why it's the winner of this test.